Salut tout le monde. Ici c'est Joe de My Geek Scene. J'ai le plaisir d'interviewer ici à JAFAX l'acteur vocal J. Michael Tatum. J. Michael Tatum, bienvenue à Grand Rapids. Comment allez-vous?
Est-ce que vous comprenez français?
Oui, comme ci, comme ça. Je ne parle pas beaucoup français.
C'est lui là totalement. Prenez ces mélanges et la raison. Je t'aime. Je voudrais manger quelque chose de gras. I literally just asked you if I could eat something sweet. It's my go-to phrase.
And I also have one more phrase because of that. I meant one more thing. Tyson Reinhardt m'a inspiré pour cette intro. So Tyson, thank you, dude, because like I tracked him down. Because I interviewed him at JAFAX last year, and dude's super cool. And I'm sorry to be Mr. Name Dropper, but I was like,
you can dropping Tyson's name is advisable.
I was like, dude, I know you know Tatum. I barely know him. I was like, any fun facts about him that I should know? And then he was like, he likes French, and I was like, all right, I'll do my best to do a French intro.
Did you just learn French for the interview, or did you speak a little bit of it already?
No, I learned French for this. I actually went out of my way. I didn't get to use her, but I went out of my way to track down my old high school French teacher just for this. But fortunately, one of my coworkers is actually from France, so
bravo.
So I had to record him and then repeat over. Écoutez, répétez.
Répétez.
The only thing I heard that much in French class was silence, François, silence.
Oh, ce n'est pas très confortable pour moi. No, I'm kidding. It's very comfortable.
I was like, je m'appelle François.
Je m'appelle François.
All right, folks. Well, for those who don't understand French, I did my basic intro. I'm here with J. Michael Tatum.
He just cursed you out in France.
No. I didn't say enculé. So that's
now he cursed you out.
Yes, I might have. But for those who don't know, J. Michael Tatum is ADR scriptwriter, ADR director, scriptwriter, voice actor for Funimation.
Done a few things.
He's been in a lot of things. Okabe from Steins Gate, France from Hitalia. Boy, that's a shocker. Scar from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and one hell of a butler, Sebastian from Black Butler.
From Black Butler. No list is complete without mentioning you know who. That's what he's called in our household. You know
okay,
who.
I was not he who shall not be named. All right, well, I start off most voice actors with this question. So,
all right.
First exposure to anime. Not as a voice actor.
First exposure to anime was Voltron and Robotech when I was just a wee lad, and back in the day when we used to watch our anime on cave walls by torchlight. I didn't know what anime was. I had no concept that it came from Japan. I don't think I was aware of what Japan was. I was so little. And I just watched this stuff because it was animated, and my mother had no problem just plumping me in front of the television and leaving it on, having no idea that this was nothing like the Smurfs or you know, the Gummy Bears, you know, stuff. Nothing wrong with those shows, but those
bouncing here and there and everywhere.
Everywhere. But it was watching those shows, and this is an honest answer. I feel watching particularly Voltron and Robotech and Star Blazers, which were all kind of on air at that time, were so unusual for anything animated at the time because most shows were, you know, for kids. They were episodic, you know, light, fluffy, fun. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, they're usually very delightful. But these were shows that were huge and epic and that had a large story arc to follow. So you couldn't just dip in anywhere. You really had to kind of watch it from the beginning,
for sure.
Or go back and watch what you could if you missed anything, because it was long story form. So I credit anime with being my first exposure to long form storytelling.
Okay. Well, since you like Star Blazers, have you used your status as a voice actor and your connections to reach out to any of the staff from, the cast from those shows?
I have met Amy Howard Wilson,
okay.
who's brilliant. I didn't throw my weight around. We just happened to be at a con together, and I was like, we were sitting at a table together signing autographs and getting to know each other. Of course, I knew who she was, and I was trying desperately not to fanboy out on her because I was like, oh my God, I'm such a fan. And then she just happened to. We were looking at each other's. Fans were bringing the program guide for us to sign, and my write-up and hers bio were right next to each other. And so she happened to read. She's like, and I mentioned Star Blazers being a big influence on me as a child, and she's like, well, sweetie, and I was like, I know, and like, yeah, she was, and it was, I don't know, she's a delightful person. Like, she is just, you never know who you're going to get when you meet a celebrity, like when you meet someone that you look up to, because sometimes you're going to catch them on a bad day, or like it's so hard for anyone to live up to the perception. But man, she was, I don't know, I couldn't have asked for better.
She's totally nice.
The sweetest, most genuine person. That voice, I could listen to that voice read a phone book, for God's sakes. Like she's wonderful.
Fun fact, though, because she's not this year for some reason, obviously scheduling differences, but she's normally a mainstay of JAFAX. Like before JAFAX became a paid convention, because this is the second year of this convention as a paid convention. Like for the first 19 years, it was a free con, and 10 of them, she was always a guest every single year. And I was going to say, too bad you weren't here last year. You could have met her, but since you've already met her, I guess I'll just scratch that part off the thing. I want to offer two parts of gratitude to you.
Okay.
Thank you for your role in Baccano as one of my favorite duo, Isaac and Miria.
I love Isaac so much. Isaac and Miria are like one of my favorite couples in all of anime. Like I want to be them when I grow up. Like they're I mean, how much fun must you be having in life to like not know that you've aged, or not know that 80 years have passed without you aging? Like that's life goal.
I mean, I recently rewatched that show for another interview with the voice actor from that show, Mr. Ladd Russo,
Brian Massey.
Brian Massey, totally cool dude.
Who was born to play that role.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't imagine it any other way.
Yeah.
But I had to rewatch that because it had been quite some time since I watched it, and I was like, this is so quality. I'm not saying to blow smoke up your ass, because I don't do that. Like, J. Michael Tatum, you're the best. No, I don't.
Okay,
do that.
you can do that. I mean, I'm not gonna keep you from it.
Cabana boys, come in and fan Mr. Tatum. But no, it's not necessarily a question about that. I really enjoyed that show, and I would have loved, and I'm still hoping for a second season, because there's so many light novels based on that.
Yeah, I think without a doubt that the work on that show, it's a beautiful show to begin with, but Tyler Walker's work on that show as the ADR director is outstanding. And Tyler's been doing this for a long time, and Baccano is quite the crown jewel in his very distinguished career. And I think it's easily one of the best dubs I've ever gotten to be a part of in any way. So
for sure.
It's wonderful to take a show that kind of is centered around America's own kind of mythology, the sort of Old West meets kind of gangster era. It was Japan's love letter to Americana, and so getting to dub it in English seemed wonderfully appropriate, and getting to utilize those dialects and that the argot of Chicago or New York, getting that was just wonderful. I love watching it just for the music of the language that was used in the adaptation. Like I'm very proud to have gotten to be part of that show. And I think Isaac and Miria, as I said, are their life goals. Like I love those characters just as characters. I don't think there's anyone in anime that's more in love with each other than those two. Like really, they're the perfect couple.
But they're lovable scoundrels.
They're lovable scoundrels.
I'm like, oh, she's sad. Let's take all of her money.
I think all great couples are lovable scoundrels.
So part 2 of my gratitude section of this interview, I also want to thank you, Terry, and Steven for that anime show. Because not only was it entertaining, I found out about it like after the fact, but it also helped me do research for other voice actor guests that I've interviewed in the past. Not big time or anything like that. Here's the way I do things. Like when I'm researching a guest, I do about generally 2 to 6 hours of research, so I don't ask the same questions as everybody else. So podcasts and stuff like that definitely help. And I really enjoyed that show. That was awesome. But my question to you is, has that show finally rode off into the sunset?
Yeah, sadly.
No.
Well, here's the deal. We did that show
saw the Patreon.
We did, yeah. We tried to bring it back. There was just to see it if there was an appetite for it, and sadly, just it didn't seem meant to happen. But we stopped doing that show for a very good reason. Like we really wanted to go out at the top of our game and not continue doing it, long after we'd kind of outlived our welcome. So I think it was sad to watch it go, because it was fun to just sit down with all of our industry friends and talk and kind of give these very personal and off-the-cuff interviews with people.
Any advice you would like to give to aspiring voice actors?
that might not, there's people that might not otherwise get the exposure. It was just fun. It was just us kind of sitting down and being ourselves and letting our industry guests be themselves, and it was really fun. It was like, Casting Couch 101. But after 4 years of doing it and trying to juggle that with everything else we were doing, it got to the point where it was just too much. to do, and the episodes came so few and far between that we finally thought maybe now's a good time. Like while we're writing out, let's write out in a blaze of glory and not just kind of peter out. Because there's nothing in my book. There are fewer things more disappointing than a show that doesn't know when to throw in the towel, that keeps trying to milk its audience well after.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and we didn't want to end like that. We wanted to end when people still loved us. So you know, it's good. And I say it's dead. I don't know that for a fact. Things happen. Who knows? There might be a reunion show one day. There
or
might
a guest panel.
Maybe a guest panel. We have done a couple of those at cons that Terry and Steve and I have done together. So it's not out of the question. But for now, no, it's not. We're not really talking about it. But you know, who knows? Who knows? Never say never.
Fair enough. To continue on with the anime portion of this interview, I have to read this because I wrote a lot. You were the scriptwriter for Attack on Titan anime series and the live-action films.
Along with Tyson Reinhardt.
Along with Tyson Reinhardt. Sorry, dude. Because I know he'll watch this. After completing the first season, was it easier adapting the movies in the second season, or did they present their own sets of challenges?
Easier in some ways because you know I already knew the characters, very well acquainted with that world, so the world building had already been done, and so it was easier to get back into it. The movies were a challenge. Are we talking about the live action movies?
Mm-hmm.
The live action movies were a challenge because the live action movies were a challenge because there's such a departure in so many ways from the original material, which and that's not a criticism, just an observation. So it was interesting because I'm like, well, this is supposed to be that character, but not quite that character, and that's. It's also strange to for the Titans to make noises like laughing and twittering and things like that, because you don't in the series you'll notice that doesn't happen.
Oh, I thought you meant twittering,
no, not twittering, no, but you know.
Just hate some more of humanity.
Chirping, making noises. You know, it was very odd, and I can't decide whether I liked it or not. For some reason, the Titans in the anime are so much more terrifying for being mostly silent, unless they're eating or making some rare noise. But being silent makes them so much more intimidating and so much more nightmarish. When I hear them, I don't know. There's something about them that they lose a little bit of their mystery for some reason for me. That's just me personally. But the movies were fun to adapt because, of course, Hanji still makes an appearance in the movies, and Hanji is one of my favorite characters I've ever gotten right for in anything, period.
I was like, did we just do a favorite something of yours? Because
I'm allowed to give myself favorites. I just hate being asked what my favorites are because then I have to think about it.
I was like, I thought we had an agreement.
This is the exception that proves the rule. That's what that is.
Okay.
But then season 2, the major challenge with season 2 is it's now a broadcast dub or a simuldub, which means that the turnaround time on script writing is much faster because it comes out. We get the raw materials, and then I have about 2-3 days to write a script, and then we have about a week to get it out the door. So it's different than the way we used to record 3 years ago when we were still doing the old sort of straight to DVD release format. Where we had good several months to get everything in order, and we had the full show to work with. So as a writer, I was able to watch episode 1 through 26 to kind of get a feel for the whole world of the show and every character's distinct arc before dipping into the adaptive process. So thank God I had that opportunity, because it's a challenge to write shows from scratch in the broadcast format, because as I'm writing episode 1, I don't have access to episode 2 yet, so I don't know where things are necessarily going. Fortunately, with Titan, it follows the manga religiously up to this point, it seems. So, I have that reference point. But each iteration of any show you work on has its own distinct challenges. But Titan has run the gamut between being written at the old pace, with the old way of recording, which we still do from time to time, by the way. And then getting to see it in a totally different iteration in the live-action film, which was interesting and kind of alien.
Seems bleaker, too.
I would argue that it's not as bleak. I don't know. That's my own impression. It's almost the original anime is very bleak to me. I mean, it's.
in terms of color. Because I don't recall.
In terms of color, I think the bleakness in the live action film, in my own opinion, and this is just my own humble opinion, the bleakness is there, but it's almost goth and it's almost a sort of bleak pastiche. It's almost cartoony in the films, which works in its own weird way, but feels like such a departure from the bleak sort of beiges and browns and hunter greens that you find in the original material, which makes it so. I find that I'm going off on a tangent here, forgive me, but I find that the color palette of the anime has a really interesting effect. It's so saturated with earth tones that you get this feeling of humanity being sort of lost in this wilderness that doesn't care whether we live or die. So it's a very, you know what I mean? Like normally those colors are thought to be very calming and the autumnal, and they're sort of, you're mesmerized by them in a very positive way. Think of Emerson talking about like the healing effects of nature, but that's not nature is a terrible, ugly, ravenous thing that wants to bite your head off.
Have you seen what animals do to each other?
Exactly. So it's like watching Grizzly Man, by the film by Werner Herzog. It's like, oh, nature is just this murderous force that has no feeling, wants to kill you. And I say all that to say like how brilliant a choice it is for that color palette in the anime, because what are these normally very comforting tones are used to the exact opposite effect, and it's brilliant. And in the films are much more Tim Burton-esque, in my opinion. There's a lot of grays and blacks, and it kind of looks like Gotham City in parts, like the ruins of Gotham City, let's say. And it's just a different palette, so it has almost this kind of goth feel, which works on a different level. It's almost, I was a goth kid, so maybe when I look at something that looks kind of, gloomy, I go, oh, that's comforting.
So tangent. So you said goth kid. Are we talking like Susie Sue and the Banshees?
Oh
the
yeah,
Cure?
yeah. Susie and the Banshees was was my spirit animal. Like she was my spirit animal. I was so goth. I was so goth that I could get away with wearing pink. I want you to think about that for a minute. How goth one has to be to get away with wearing pink. Yeah. You know what? I finally decided not to be goth anymore when I was in my 20s, and I realized every night I would leave to go out, it would take me longer to get ready to go out than I would spend out.
Oh, I thought you decided to stop being goth when you realized that Bela Lugosi is dead.
Ah, boo! This interview is over.
Well, folks, this was Joe from My Geek Scene, but oh, come on now, you threw that out. You threw that out there. It's like
touche. Very Bauhaus of you.
Ooh, nice.
You bad seed, you.
Mr. Single. All right. So, on to another thing that you love.
Yes.
Shakespeare, 2 topics, Shakespeare and literature.
Shakespeare and literature.
All right, obviously you're a huge fan of the Bard, William Shakespeare.
Very much so.
It appears that his work is very sacred to you. Are there any movie or TV adaptations of his work that you enjoy? Case in point, the 1993 and 2012 versions of Much Ado About Nothing, or the Blackadder BBC series.
That's funny. Blackadder owes more to Shakespeare than people realize. That's interesting that you bring that up. I'm very picky about Shakespeare, and I find that I'm very hard to please, and that speaks volumes. I think that speaks more to my own limitations as a lover of Shakespeare than it does to any shortcomings on the part of people that would try to perform it. But to me, Shakespeare is not an artifact or a relic. Shakespeare is still very much alive and still very much an ongoing dialogue, and there's still so much to learn from the Bard, because I agree with critic Harold Bloom, if I may name drop for a moment myself.
No name dropping, only I can do it.
Harold Bloom said, I think rightly, that Shakespeare invented us, meaning the way we tend to look at ourselves as people and the way we decipher our own inner lives largely comes from Shakespeare's language, largely comes from his take on human beings. Never has there been a writer, I think, that disappears so completely into their work that, if I were to read a novel by William Faulkner or Hemingway, you could always find the character that's speaking for that author. Like, this is Faulkner in disguise, this is Hemingway in disguise, what have you. In Shakespeare, you can't find that. He gave us something like over 200 distinct characters that have their own very vibrant and contradictory and complicated worldviews that are so alive and so real, but none of them, none of them represent Shakespeare. Shakespeare's like the weird sort of absentee watchmaker god, if you like, who kind of set that universe in motion and left these characters to kind of come alive on their own. When you think of the genius it takes to be able to write for that many contradictory perspectives and make them really breathe and resonate with audiences hundreds of years after your death, that's amazing. Like, Shakespeare created something that really continues to influence people without us even being aware that we're influenced by it. So Shakespeare is important to me because Shakespeare is kind of my Bible. Like, whenever I need insight, or whenever I need to kind of get to know, like, it's almost as he even anticipated his detractors, like his modern detractors. Like, he anticipated that mindset by giving us characters like Iago from Othello, or Edmund, the great nihilists from King Lear. These are, the school of resentment, the people that hate Shakespeare's influence, and so just because it's the anxiety of influence, Harold Bloom calls it, where you feel so overpowered by the person you look up to that you end up vilifying them just to survive psychologically. And that's a characterization that had never been done before. Shakespeare wrote those characters, and so it's as though he even anticipated his detractors hundreds of years in the future, and people that try to write off Shakespeare as being a dead European white guy that had nothing interesting to say, or that whatever. Like, that's very much an Iago point of view. That's Iago trying to vilify his own personal god, Othello, and take him down a notch because it's the only way he can kind of lift himself up. It's that kind of thing, that kind of powerful writing, that sort of characterization, that ability to bring to life characters that just jump off the page is what draws me to acting, writing. It's what draws me to conversation. It's what draws me to just interacting with the world. So, having said all that, watching Shakespeare performed can be very painful, because you come into it going, I see so many missed opportunities here, where maybe this actor or this director's interpretation of the work falls a little short of what they might have done to tease out more subtlety in the work. And nowadays you run so often into Shakespeare presented as kind of a quaint artifact. Like, isn't this interesting? It's done in kind of like, hey, remember when this was acceptable? It's almost an unthinking parody of the Bard. That said, I think if Shakespeare is done lovingly, and if you just kind of let go of your expectations and allow the Bard to teach you how to read the Bard, you can enjoy anything, because Shakespeare's works themselves are always larger than any single performance or any single iteration. So I love watching the movies, but I always walk away having this sort of like pro-con conversation about what I thought worked versus what I didn't. But that's the point.
Okay. On to, now I have to read this too. You mentioned in an interview that if there is a movie adaptation of a book you are interested in, you will forgo the book. However, in regards to books you've read in the past, are there any adaptations that you feel are better than the original book they are based on? I would be willing to argue that A Clockwork Orange and The Crow are two examples that are actually better than the source material. Haters are going to be flooding me over for...
And here's my response to that. I don't believe it's fair to compare films and books, because they work on two completely different levels. They're completely different media. So it's sort of like going to a sushi restaurant and saying it's not as good as a steakhouse. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, why would you go to a sushi restaurant if you wanted steak? Books have an inwardness about them that film only scratches the surface on. When you're watching a film, even the most subtly crafted and well-produced film is surface, in the sense that you don't have access to the inner life of those characters. You have access to metaphors within the visual universe that may reflect back on what that character is thinking and feeling. But there's this kind of gap that, as an audience member, just having access to the purely visual and the purely audible, watching a film or television show, you then just project yourself onto that character and kind of kind of live in their skin, which is why you're drawn to this character, and that's why you feel for them when they're on the edge of a cliff, or when they're trying to profess their love for someone for the first time. You feel for them, but you feel for them as you. When you're reading a book, a really clever author, and what you can do in writing that you really can't do as well, and I shouldn't say can't, but it's much harder to do successfully with any other medium, is to give the reader access to the mindset, the perspective, the worldview, and the inner life of the character that is going through what the character is going through in the novel, what is at the heart of the story. So, whereas a film, you'll watch a character and project your own self, wherever you are in life, that's who you will project on the person you're watching. when you're reading something, a really clever author kind of compels you, even against your will, to identify with someone you would not project yourself onto because you don't think of yourself as being that person or as being like that. So, for example, if you read a Jane Austen novel, my particular favorite happens to be Emma. She's a bit of a shit, Emma. Like, you don't like her very much because she's got this kind of, she's just a busybody and she feels herself better than everybody else. And, you know, you realize, well, she's kind of a bitch who really thinks a lot of herself and kind of looks down on everybody else because she just thinks this life in the English countryside is so provincial and boring and we're just playing cards and la 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 la. But you are drawn into her self-awareness that you find yourself identifying with all those qualities that you don't like about her, so that you feel you really inhabited her consciousness. What that does is now, if you've attended the book carefully, you walk away from it with a new perspective, a new insight, because somewhere inside of you is an Emma. Whether you acknowledge it or not, whether that's the part of whether that's the facet of your personality you identify with, there's an Emma inside of you. There's an Iago inside of you. There is a Hemingway and a Faulkner all inside of you. When you read those books and a really clever author has forced you to look at the world through their eyes rather than just project yourself onto them, you walk away enriched in a way that film, I don't want to say film can't do it, but film operates on a different level. So when we're talking about a book that's been made into a movie, we're talking about two completely different aesthetic experiences that work on the mind completely differently. So comparing one to the other is, I think, unfair. That's not to suggest that movies can't be bad on their own. Like, I think when a movie doesn't work as an adaptation of something, it just doesn't work as a movie, period. So like sometimes you'll, but and I think I've said this elsewhere too, there's so many books left for me to read because I'm an avid reader and I could live to be 1,000 years old and still only read half of the things on my list. I don't want to read books that are made movies now. One of my chief complaints about modern writing is that it's all written like a film script. You know, it's just with just he said, she said in place of quotation marks. And I don't like that. The reason I read books is to really get inside a character's head, not just stand outside and watch what they're going through and intuit what they're going through based on my own limitations. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, my mind was just blown by your vast explanation. And
sorry, I realize it's really...
No, it's not a...
I should write a book.
All right. So, to say that you're a Whovian is a vast understatement.
I'm a little bit of a Whovian, yeah.
All right, let's talk about your character, Dr. Davis, in the fan series, The Soldier Stories.
Oh, yeah. Nice. A really great group of guys that I met at a convention several years ago called Take One. It was a really fun improv group, and they had a studio back near me in Oklahoma. Dallas is not very far from Oklahoma City. Just, hey, do you want to, we were all Whovians together, and they were making a fan film, and they thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you were in it? And I was like, I would love to be in it, because the chances of me ever being in the actual series are pretty slim. Though, I mean, God, that would be a dream come true. So yeah, I got to play, well, without giving too much away, I got to play
villain?
A villain.
Well, I might as well say it because my next question's going to spoil it.
Well, what's your next question? Let's go for it.
Oh, okay,
I'll let you spoil it. So that I have probable deniability.
Yes, all right, because my girlfriend's a huge Whovian. I have not watched any Doctor Who, so forgive me. I'm not trying to be a poser, like, oh, yeah. Okay, look, name dropping again. Sammy Inoue Hart gave me the same look. She was so disappointed when she found out that I don't watch Doctor Who. Big time.
It's all right. It's understandable if no one's gotten into it because the show's like, 54 years old now. So you have a lot of work to do if you're just going to dip into it.
I mean, like, my girlfriend and I have this, she wants me to watch Doctor Who. I'm like, okay. She goes, I'll watch Doctor Who, but then, no, I'll watch Doctor Who if you watch a season of Cowboy Bebop, which is only one season. And then she's like, yeah, but we'll watch all this Doctor Who. I'm like, this is decades worth of material. This is unfair. I'm asking for 26 episodes that range for 13 hours tops.
Yeah, you should. That's definitely a trade-off that needs to happen. Like, if she expects you to watch Doctor Who, then
I mean, like, when I watched the Soldier Stories, I enjoyed it. I watched both episodes.
Yeah.
So, but now I'm going to ask the question she wanted me to ask you. Do you know what happened to allow Dr. Davis to have empathy and to want to help others, considering Cybermen are strictly logical and have no emotion? Did they give you a background?
I think I kind of came up with it. We kind of sort of came up with this together. This idea that Dr. Davis had, because Cybermen aren't born; they're made from living material, similar to the Daleks. So presumably somewhere, and we've seen this in the Doctor Who universe before. You haven't, but most of us have. That they're every now and again, like I think it's happened maybe all twice in the 54-year run, where a Cyberman has showed just a hint of remorse or just a hint of awareness that they were something far more desirable to be before they were transformed into Cybermen. And so the idea was that obviously at some point in his life, in his presumably very long life, Dr. Davis must have been a person or something like it with emotions and empathy, and had that, of course, bred out of him when he was made into a Cyberman, say it like it's a last name. When he was made into a Cyberman, and then when whatever happened to make him feel regret, he then sort of banished himself to Earth and tried to make up for it, and I think picked up empathy through being a therapist, because, I mean, he's a machine, a part of him at least, so he would process things very quickly and try to, so I think of him like an AI that's trying to emulate human intelligence by kind of processing what they say and kind of making creative decisions. Obviously, there was something in his algorithm that allowed him to do that, and eventually broke through into empathy, which made him want to be more human. So what we see in Dr. Davis is, or what I hope we see in Dr. Davis is someone who's kind of run the gamut, who started as human or something like it, became machine, and is trying to redeem himself and find the human in himself again, which is, I think, brilliant. And again, it's kind of a miraculous thing, but in the Doctor Who universe, miraculous things happen.
It seems like the Borg from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
It's very similar. Very similar.
Interesting. I mean, I don't really watch much Star Trek. My brother does, but I've picked up enough to make some comparisons and whatnot. Now, are there more episodes coming from that series?
Not that I know of.
I think that's the end of that question.
Again, it may down the road, but nothing. No one's told me anything yet, and I'm an actor, so I'm always the last one to know.
Oh, and I enjoyed it, especially the end.
Yeah.
When someone's singing. Now, speaking of doctors, did you watch David Tennant and Jessica Jones, the Netflix series?
I didn't. I haven't. Really? You're going to give me shit for that? And you haven't seen a one Doctor Who episode? You've had 54 years?
Oh, excuse me. You've had the last few years to watch Jessica Jones on Netflix. I know you're busy doing voices and making magic happen.
I'm kind of busy
reading.
I don't get to watch that many shows anymore. There just isn't time, sadly. So when I watch a show, it's rare. I think out of everything, like let's say 20 shows come out in a year that are like must-watch television. I'm lucky to get to one.
I know how that goes, running a website, having a full-time job, and a full-time girlfriend.
It's
I
really
understand.
hard.
I don't really get to watch much anime or play video games.
I also try to keep up with my reading a lot more than I try to watch
Fair
television, because I feel like, I don't know, as a writer, I don't want to watch too much television because I feel like it's lazy to watch television, because then you just emulate what you see on television rather than trying to write from a place of original experience. And that sounds weird, but I think reading a book, getting back to what I said earlier about having access to these characters' inner life and really get to inhabit their consciousness, I feel like reading a book really gives you more perspective on the human condition than film can generally. So I don't like to watch more film or television than I read. I always want reading to have won out.
But may I throw that out there as a suggestion? Like, if you do find yourself scrolling through Netflix, like, hey, I should watch Jessica Jones.
I've heard good things about it, and I'm definitely interested.
He did such a good job. I was never familiar with him, and then when I saw him, I was like, wow, you actually gave some sympathy. Nope, you screwed up the character again. Like, I hate you. Not because, because his acting was so wonderful as a villain. I was like, I'm actually going to feel bad for your character. Nope, you just went and screwed it up royally again. Like, you're a terrible, terrible person. So, very good to watch. But,
all right.
One of the topics I wanted to talk to you about that, I've heard bits and pieces here and there is comics, but I know you're a voracious reader. What comics are you currently reading?
Currently, nothing. There just hasn't been time. I've been steeped in the Attack on Titan universe, so that's been not manga. I mean, if you want to call that comics. So that's been my whole world, because I read it constantly, and I go back and again to try to pick up and kind of strip away layers to kind of get any references that I think need to be teased out, or I think would do well to be teased out in the adaptation. So that's been my whole world now. Previously, I mean, I'm a big Batman fan, so I've really been loving Grant Morrison's work on the series in the past few years. That's where I am now. Also, what else? Thor. I'm a huge Thor fanboy. always been a Thor fanboy. And I think the last Thor bit I read was some of J. Michael Straczynski's work from the early aughts, in that whole run that he did.
Straczynski had a good run on Spider-Man years ago.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I need to pick up his Spider-Man arcs too, because I haven't. But I love me some Spidey.
So
I need to get back into comics. I feel like I've neglected it in the past few years.
Comics are wonderful. I mean,
They are.
art and story work. I mean, story combined together. I mean, do you follow, like when you're reading comics or when you read comics? Did you follow writers instead of just titles and stuff like that?
I didn't follow, not at first, not consciously, but then later I would find writers and be like, oh, then I would be drawn to their work, and I tended to read a lot of graphic novels. So I love Grant Morrison. I love
Grant Morrison stuff can be far out there.
That's great. That's what I want.
Like the Invisibles and
the Invisibles and his work on the Doom Patrol. Is amazing. Like it blows your mind because it's just so genre busting and fourth wall breaking that you become. It does surprising things to your brain if you can get over the gut reaction of like, what? Which I strive to. I love being like, I am watching a series, getting back to television watching right now. I'm watching David Lynch's Twin Peaks Revisited, going back to that, which is on Showtime. And I love it. That's the kind of stuff I watch, the stuff that makes no sense whatsoever. The stuff that you walk away from going, I have no idea what I've just saw, but I've been given all these elements that now I am weirdly, on instinct, I'm trying to weave together into a story, but I have no idea if it's the story I'm supposed to get or not. I love being left with that kind of power because it's very disorienting. And as an art form, it's very powerful because you walk away realizing how much you are responsible for the story you've seen.
I mean, like The Nameless, that was something that came out a while ago. Like within the last few years, that's horror. You know, I mean, it was a different take on horror. And The Filth, I read that years ago. Like, I've loved comic books. Like, I can easily shoot the breeze with people about comic books. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it because, you know, like, you talk about books all the time, but I was like, when you mentioned comics, I was like, oh, I want to talk to him about that.
Yeah, are you a fan of the Sandman series?
I was
Gaiman? Like that stuff. It's classic
Neil
stuff.
Gaiman's Sandman comics right here. That was the next thing I was going to ask.
I think that was the first series I read that, or the first like run that got me back into comic books from when I was really little. I read them. But I didn't. I mean, my relationship to them wasn't terribly sophisticated. They were just, you know, cheap, disposable entertainment at the time, because I was so young. I didn't know pearls before swine, you know. But as I got older and I found Neil Gaiman, I was like, oh my God, there's a whole art form here that I'm not even aware of as an art form.
I know.
And it completely it blew open doors in my mind that I didn't even know were there.
I felt stupid though, like initially. Because my friend was like, you got to read this. I was like, no, it's not superhero comics. Pshaw, you know? And then I decided to just read it, and I was like, I apologized to him. I was like, I was a fool. My eyes have been opened. I'm enlightened. Thank you to the world of, like, you know, non-mainstream comics, because I believe it was released through Vertigo, at least a print of it, you know, a reprint of
Vertigo,
it.
Yeah, Vertigo.
Not necessarily. I don't think it was Dark Horse. I want to say it was Vertigo.
I think it was Dark Horse, which I think was
so?
a division of Vertigo, if I'm not mistaken. It's been so long. Forgive me if I'm getting it wrong, but I want to say it was Dark Horse.
Q fanboys typing voraciously.
Yeah, somebody find that. I don't know if I'm right. But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that I'm drawn to in comic books.
Did you check out Transmetropolitan by Warren Ellis?
Yes.
Preacher by
Warren Ellison's another one. Preacher's another one that I love. I'm not as into Preacher as I was to other, but I really do like it. Anything by, and why am I blanking on his name? The Watchmen.
Alan Moore.
Thank you, Alan Moore. My God, I should be ashamed of myself. Anything by Alan Moore, I will sit down and treat like a Ouija board. Like that's just, I feel like somewhere in here is a clue to how I should be living my life.
Have you read The Boys by, I want to say, Warren Ellis?
I don't.
It's a different take on the superhero genre. The Boys are a bunch of, they're superpowered beings, but superhumans have gotten to the point that they need to be put in check. Like they have this public face, but then behind the scenes, they're just deviant people that just do not care about the general public. So one character whose girlfriend was killed ends up joining the Boys to get revenge on him. But the character is drawn to look like Simon Pegg in real life. So
that's cool.
I believe it's by Warren Ellis. Don't quote me on that. I mean, I have a lot of favorite writers when it comes to comics, like Greg Rucka.
If you haven't checked out Secret
Ed
Six,
Brubaker.
Oh yeah. Secret Six. Are you familiar with Secret Six at all?
Jog my memory here. I read so many comics.
It's basically it's a series that involved, like, it took some of the throwaway villains from the DC universe and put them together in like a sort of like Suicide Squad, but much better.
Wait, was this the Soldiers of Fortune?
Nope.
That was done by, I want to say,
Nope.
Grant Morrison?
It's called Secret Six, and it's by a female writer, artist, whose name escapes me because I'm terrible with names.
Gail Simone?
Gail Simone. You're good. Yeah, Gail Simone. And she's incredible. Like, it's some of the
liked
best,
her Wonder Woman run.
It's some of the best writing I've ever encountered in the genre. And the fact that it's like it takes all these villains that no one cared about and put them together and puts them in such compelling stories. Like, I love it. If you haven't read Secret Six, that was my obsession a few years ago.
I think I might have, but it's been so long. I mean, like a long time ago. I could easily say I've read over 500 trades and graphic novels easily.
Probably. So
now,
yeah.
what yes, you've been reading the Attack on Titan manga. Did you venture into any other manga series, or is it just for stuff strictly for work?
It's typically just stuff strictly for work because I don't like as an actor writer, I don't like encountering stuff I'm not working on because then I don't want to develop an appetite for something that I may not ever get the chance to work for. Does that make sense?
I understand.
When I go into audition, I try to know absolutely nothing about what I'm auditioning for because I don't want to jinx myself, and I also don't want to go in with any expectations because I'm just setting myself up for heartache. Because 9 times out of 10 I won't get to work on it. So I try to be as blissfully ignorant of what's out there as possible until it is right in front of me, and then I work on it. And then I'm an absolute devotee, but not until.
May I make a suggestion?
No.
Okay.
If it was it a particular title?
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Okay.
I respect you, but no, I don't want to know. La 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 la.
I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it now.
I'm very zen. I try to be zenfully ignorant.
All right, fair
about
enough.
such
fair
things.
Enough,
It's kind of a superstition of mine.
I'll hit you at a Q&A panel instead. No. All right. So as we're getting out of this, we're gonna go back to. Tying back into anime, season 2 of My Hero Academia is out.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about your character Tenya? Is it Ida?
It's Tenya Ida. God, I love Tenya. I feel like Tenya, of all the characters I've played, I spoke earlier about, there always being these characters inside of you that you may not identify with them, but a good drama or a good book or something will really kind of force you to identify or to at least acknowledge that facet of your personality. So whenever I act, I'll frequently take up the mantle of some character and realize, the character is not like some magic cloak that I put on and I become that person. It's me kind of looking at it from the outside and going, oh, well, that's just me. I do that. And I just have to kind of leave myself open to finding this character's context and realizing, well, that's how I would act if I were in that set of circumstances and I were coming from this place. So it's just me. Every character I've ever played is just me. Just a different facet of my personality, and they may have a different accent or something, but it's just me. And I don't care what an actor says. That's true of every actor.
Of course.
But Tenya is probably the most like the side of my personality I identify with already than any character I've played, with the exception of maybe Kyoya, where Tenya is kind of like, I realized Kyoya was always my idealized self. I'm like, oh, I'd love to think of myself in high school as having been like Kyoya. I wasn't really like Kyoya. That's how I saw myself, but that's not how I actually was. Tenya was probably how I actually was. A very good-hearted, but type A personality. It's a little much, a little extra.
Follow the rules.
Follow the rules. Wild gesture. That's me to a T. You may have noticed, like the wild gestures. I love that in the second season we even have moments where the camera will just errantly follow his gestures for no reason whatsoever, just to underscore how erratic he is. That's me. I mean, you tie my hands behind my back and I can't have a conversation. But Tenya, I get where he's coming from. I get his energy. And it doesn't feel like acting. It just feels like I'm stepping in the booth and going, yeah, this is the role I would play in that dynamic if I were going to high school with a bunch of, quirk possessing kids. So yeah, Tenya is the closest to me that I think I've ever come as an actor. I'm like, oh, that's who I am. Yep. Except he has better quads than I do.
Oh, for sure. Well, I wouldn't say for sure. That was almost a slight against you. Looking at those quads, bro. Look at those quads. All right, as we're going into the home stretch of this interview, you are in the new web series called Confessionals.
Yeah.
Your character is
K.
Mickey
Malcolm.
Is he an aspect of your personality that is amplified to 10?
Sure. He's absolutely just like the series is written so that all of us in it get to play really exaggerated versions of ourselves, and the challenge is to make that real.
Jeremy's like that.
Hey, no, but I mean, it's just getting to play versions of ourselves that you're like alternate reality versions of ourselves. Like, what if you took this one trait and just ramped it up? what would that make you as a person? So it's really a lot of fun getting to work with my partner Brandon, who's a marvelous actor. You know, it was just wonderful getting to play with that, because that's nothing like our real relationship. Like we're so chill and so calm, but in
not critiquing fashion.
Not at all. Brandon is such a t-shirt and jeans guy.
I will say this oh, sorry.
Oh, no. So it's really a lot of fun to play with it, because I can't take myself too seriously. It's just not, it's never advisable, but it's wonderful to get to poke fun at yourself at the expense of this inflated view people sometimes have of you, because you happen just by sheer luck to play a role they like or whatever. So it's really nice to get to make fun of myself in a way that kind of, it's such a release. Does that make sense? Like,
no, I can understand.
I love playing K. Mickey Malcolm, because it is a side of my personality that I'm glad does not have the reins, but it's fun to explore that and just kind of put that out there. It's also fun to be on camera. I don't get to do that very often.
I will throw this out there. I did notice that there was a theme of manservants who were treated poorly in the 3 episodes I've seen than when you were on screen.
There is a definite.
For those who don't know what I'm talking about, watch the first episode. You'll get a good. Oh, I've watched all 3 episodes that have been
really
released.
Funny. That was a totally improvised moment, by the way. I just did that, and because I thought Joey was wonderful and he was like super, you know, like into it and was focused, and I was trying to break his focus because he was so intense, and I just thought I'd do that, and he ran with it, and it worked, and so John decided to keep it. And I was like, yes. It's one of my favorite moments in the entire series, is me getting to do that. You'll see it. Go watch it. It's freaking awesome. Confessionals. It's myself, Jeremy, Bryce, Pappenbrook, Brandon McInnes,
David Vincent,
some special guests appearing. There might be a few other people in there months. But definitely watch it. It's basically like a version of The Office, but it follows all of us on the con circuit, playing, of course, really overblown and somewhat obnoxious versions of ourselves. And I think it's really funny, and it's brought to you by John Christie, the writer-director.
And as we're wrapping this up, if people wanted to find out or follow you online, where could they find you?
Carrier pigeon usually is the best way. Carrier pigeon.
Not
Raven.
an owl?
No, owls are too expensive, and they just crap on everything.
Harry Potter didn't think so.
Well, Harry Potter, that's a fantasy. No, I'm on Facebook. Rarely I'm on Twitter, and that's about it. I really should be more. I like to be mysterious. I like to be.
But where can they find you on Twitter?
Oh, J. Michael Tatum, Twitter.com. It's just a picture of me in a tux. That's the real me. If it's pictures of ladies' butts, it's not me, but you should know that.
Oh man, all that research I did. Final question: what would you like to say to your fans throughout the years?
Thank you for everything, you guys. This is like one of the best jobs in the world. Like but without you guys, I'm just a crazy man in a padded room making funny voices. So thank you for validating me, and thank you for supporting each other, and thank you for giving me a chance to be part of this really awesome universe called anime. And it's been great. I love the chance to live positively in your view of what we do. So thank you very much. You are the best part about what I get to do for a living.
All right, well, J. Michael Tatum, thank you for this interview.
Thank you.
Well, folks, this is Joe from My Geek Scene with J. Michael Tatum at JAFAX. Au revoir.
Au revoir.